So now you're a comedian and you got canceled for a domestic assault joke. And then in response to that, instead of apologizing like a good boy, you put up a joke ad site about special needs helmets to protect the people who are offended by you. And now, to get yourself out of trouble, you're going to come on my podcast.
I never
That's
said
your
that.
plan.
I was hoping it would make things way worse. I'm hoping we can drive sales to that very real website about the helmets.
Yes, anyways, congratulations on
Thank
that.
you very much.
I thought the joke was funny,
Thank
risky,
you.
and funny.
course.
And I thought your response was dead on. Like, one of the things I've noticed is that people who are harassed by sensorial-minded nullwits almost always back down and apologize. And then my sense of that is that a mob comes after them first for whatever hypothetical sin they've committed, and then they apologize, and a second mob comes after them for that.
Exactly.
And then they lessen their own character by the false apology, and they embolden these idiot accusers. And so why did you decide, when this blew up around you, and I mean in some ways it's a tempest in a teapot, but when this blew up around you, why did you decide to take the strategy that you took? Why weren't you like racked with guilt and apologetic? And
Because it's just comedy. I'm just doing what's funny to me. It's never any deeper than that, nor should it be for anybody. I'm saying things that my imagination drums up, that makes me happy, release endorphins in my head, that makes my life happier. And all I do is share those thoughts with other people in hopes that it makes their life easier.
well, I've been watching what you do on your specials, and you're continually interacting with the audience, which, and correct me if I've got this wrong, I mean, a lot of the comedians that I've spoken to, they spend a lot of time preparing their sets and practicing, but you're doing, it seems to be something that's much more akin to spontaneous wit. And that's a dangerous thing to do, because you could easily be not funny.
Oh, high risk, high reward, yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's also that because you're doing that, you don't have a lot of time to exactly think through what you're going to say, right? I mean, if something strikes you as amusing, you pretty much have to go for it. And if your head's full of censorship-related thoughts, you're going to be not funny in about 15 seconds. So
you have to let the intrusive thoughts win in comedy. You have to. What comes, if you're a naturally funny person, the first thing that comes to your mind should be the funniest thing to you most of the time in a comedic situation.
And it has to be the first thing. Yeah, you know, if you're writing a multiple choice test, by the way, if you second guess your intuition about the right answer, you're more likely to be wrong with the second guess.
Yeah, is that true?
Yeah, that immediate
makes complete
response.
sense.
Yeah, that immediate response tends to be better. Yeah, well, and it's a weird thing, because that thing that's comical inside you, that's providing you with the intuition for the jokes, it has to be in quick
Timing's everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be a quick relationship with the audience. Yeah, timing is absolutely everything. You want to say the most pointed thing at exactly the right time. And so what do you think, or maybe, I don't know if you've thought about it, what do you think is, well, first of all, how broad scale do you think this rebellion against what you said actually is? How many people do you think are behind it? And why do you think it's become such a big deal?
It's probably a few dozen thousand, which sounds like a lot until you remember there's 8 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
And I would say 90% of the small majority that is upset with me doesn't go to comedy shows anyway, or wouldn't vibe with me as a person anyways, which is fine.
Right, they're probably not that funny. I watched a couple of them today on YouTube.
I can imagine.
Oh my God, yeah, I mean, they're the sort of people that you just want to, what do you want for them? You want them to spend eternity in a hell composed of nothing but people like them talking to them.
Oh,
That'd be
so
good.
Twitter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly that.
Right.
But that's the thing, is it's like whether you enjoy what I do or not, you don't even have to know it exists. If I'm your problem, if you and I are face to face and you have a problem with my comedy that I tell, that I admit to the world, right? If you just remove yourself from me, if you do something as simple as just turn around, there is an entire planet behind you for you to go explore and live the rest of your life. You don't ever have to think about me. You don't have to talk about me. I don't like screamo heavy metal music. Guess how often I think about it or talk about it? 0% of the time. You just remove yourself from the situation. I see no harm in trying to make people laugh as a general intention.
Yeah, well, I also don't understand exactly from a purely logical perspective, what the people who are complaining exactly expect from you, because, and maybe it is that they have no sense of humor, and that's highly likely, or that they're doing something we can talk about, which is gaining some kind of benefit from their complaints, some virtue signaling. I really see that with the men in particular. Well, I know I really care a lot for women.
I know.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly.
Yeah, I saw one TikTok video who was like, I have a wife and I found this severely disrespectful. I was like, okay, you cuck.
Yeah.
Whatever, dude.
Yeah. He probably thinks that's a form of foreplay.
Yeah, what do you want to get more pussy outside of your wife? Like, chill out. You're already married. She already respects you. Like, what do you want
well, I
from
used
me?
to see when I had demonstrations around me, which used to be more common than they are now, which is just as well. The worst people I ever saw at those demonstrations weren't the harridan women who were screeching like fishwives, but the men that were hypothetically there to support them. Man, I tell you, I couldn't even look at some of those guys without having a shudder run up my spine. There's almost nothing worse than a man who tries to worm himself in with a group of women by pretending to be more on their side than the women actually are, when their actual motivation is to use that. What was that? Gad Saad, the evolutionary psychologist who works at Concordia, he called that the sneaky fire a routine. Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's actually a phrase from evolutionary biology. I'll tell you a funny story that goes along with that. Okay. This is hilarious and so telling. So primatologists who studied orangutans figured out a long time ago that there are two variant male types of orangutan. Okay, so there's like, orangutans tend to hang around in trees, they're arboreal. But the males who become dominant in a given territory get so large, sort of like a linebacker in football, and they have these big fat pads around their face that are circular. They get so large they can't really go in trees anymore. And the females come to them. But then there are other males in the vicinity for who the primatologists thought were adolescents for a very long time, because they look like adolescent males and they hang around in the trees. But they turn out to be, many of them, fully mature males whose development into the linebacker is forestalled by the fact that they're not at the top of the pecking order. Right, and so their strategy is sneaky rape.
Jesus.
Right. So it doesn't take much of an imagination to map that onto the feminist male who's so on the side of women that, he gets to be the friend who can entice some poor girl into bed when she's at her lowest point.
So it's almost like their own insecurity and lack of manhood. Manhood probably isn't the best word to use, but it stunts their own evolution.
Well, it requires that they take a different pathway to mating success. They can't use dominance. Right.
So pathetic.
Yeah. So why did you decide to come on my podcast?
I'm a huge fan, man.
Thank you, sir.
Listen, you and I have never met. I'll be truthfully honest. I haven't done extensive research into everything you've done, but I find you to be a very kind man and very well-spoken and someone who stands on their morals and the realism of society today. And I think that is incredibly rare, and I just highly appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you. I wasn't fishing for compliments, but I do appreciate the fact that they emerged. Well, I'm curious partly, too, because I think it's fair to say that your primary fan base is women. I'm not certain of that, but it is the case. Okay, and is it almost always women that you interact with in the crowd?
No, not at all. It's total luck of the draw, whatever happens. I mean, women yell out the most, for sure. Like, they'll heckle the most, so that will draw more adamant crowd work, like that I didn't necessarily intend on doing. But overall, no, it's just luck of the draw. Is that
something that's particularly characteristic of your shows? Because I would think,
Oh, it's bad.
Well,
I've kind of created my own crowd work monster in a way. A friend of mine put this in perspective for me. If I got popular from doing crowd work, which was a very specific strategy, I only post my crowd work because I don't feel like burning through material. Comics build for minimum a year, 2, 3 years to build an hour-long show, right? I would feel like a total piece of shit if I let you pay money to come see the exact same material you just saw for free online. So crowd work being a very unique circumstance that really isn't to be duplicated at any other show that you do, because you're not going to meet the same person who's been through the same circumstance, has the same story to tell, right? So this is a very unique thing that you could share, and it doesn't burn through any of your material at all.
So that's
But-
why you've been making the specials on YouTube out of crowd work.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, because you can make them permanent, and you said it doesn't interfere with the novelty of a prepared show.
Yes.
And so you